Welcome. My name is Bill Withers. I am a founder, owner, and leader at Adapt by Design. And as you will have heard in the founder's story, Adapt by Design is an SME. And as you've worked out, we're pretty passionate about these SMEs. Now, the reason for that and why we're passionate about it is in the founder's story. However, what I'd like to talk to you about is what our definition of an SME is. An SME is often defined by economists and many different groups as being an organisation of a certain size, number of people that work there. However, in our definition, it's more about how the business is organised. It's about the overlap of ownership and leadership. It means that all the decision rights for that organisation are in the room. It means that if we need to change the fundamental strategies of that business to go in a new direction, and that could affect anything, leadership, culture, the economic engine, those decision rights are in the room. This then means that we can, as coaches, we can actually work with the team to truly change and affect the organisation, the total system, not just parts of the system. And this is fundamental to our offering. So there we go. We need something to guide us to make sure we build that sort of offering. And that's where the ADAPT principles come in. So in a moment, I'm going to take you through those ADAPT principles that are the guidance for the product team and for the whole organization for how we're going to solve the problems for the owners and leaders of SMEs, but in service of all of their stakeholders. The first principle is develop system leadership. This comes from, in my introduction, I spoke about the whole system, being able to form strategy and implement strategy that actually can affect any part of an organizational business. And so if we think of that organization as a system, what we're trying to do is help leaders develop the understanding about that whole system. A lot of people that founded businesses, they founded them by just really getting in the garage or whatever they were doing. They were craftspeople and they started saying, oh, okay, I think I can do this. But what they had to do is they had to do bank reconciliations. They had to do collections. They had to employ people. They had to do things, and they started to get an appreciation for all the different roles and problems and challenges of their business. As a business grows, often you get specialists in that may actually be very good accountants or very good in sales or some particular part of your business, but they don't necessarily get trained in the understanding and the responsibility for the whole system. So to develop system leadership, what we're trying to do is help people take on that level of responsibility, to understand that they are in service of the entire system. The second principle is build healthy culture. Well, I think everybody wants to build a healthy culture. They want an organization that's going to be really, really effective and be as productive. But what do we mean by building a healthy culture? Historically, a lot of organizations were actually built on the concept of extrinsic motivation. There was either a carrot or a stick. There was either you're going to get certain sort of incentives over here, or you're going to get there's the fear of the loss of your job and that sort of thing. What we're talking about is moving to intrinsic motivation. Now, there's a lot more research and support for this sort of approach. Intuitively, though, I found that for myself in my working life, I wanted to be in organizations that appreciated my own aspirations and motivations. And I think that more and more, a lot of people are going to want that in their workplace. And it's essential if we're going to build the trust environments that allow founders and leaders of SMEs to be able to scale their business and hand over decision rights and trust other people to take on new roles and new responsibilities or new accountabilities. And obviously, if you're scaling or you're doing succession, you are actually transferring decision rights. And so maximizing trust requires a move to intrinsic motivation. The third principle I'd like to introduce you to is develop sense-making maps. Sense-making is, I was introduced to or discovered it. There's a guy called Carl Weick that coined the term and coined the sort of domain of study, if you like. But for me, it's simply this, that if we're going to build environments where people can be very productive and this concept of high trust and intrinsic motivation, we need to create an environment that's really clear, or as clear as we can possibly make it, for everybody that's in the system and contributing to the productivity of our business. And so it is about giving people that clarity. So when we often go into organizations, we ask the leaders to draw a picture of how you work. And historically, the standard way of doing this was to draw an org chart. But an org chart tends to talk to accountability, but not flow, and it doesn't truly deal with, if the market changes or the product changes, how do we redefine those maps? So just think of develop, there's a lot to this area, but just to summarize it, it is a way of giving context to everybody within the business. The fourth principle is designed to deliver value to customers. And this can be coupled with develop sense-making maps. Essentially, between these two principles, what we're trying to do is say, how can an organization, how can a business best organize itself in service of its stakeholders? And a primary stakeholder is the customer. So how do you actually take your offering to the marketplace, and how do you actually set yourself up to be able to adapt to feedback from customers and all of those sorts of things? Now, we deal with a wide range of SMEs who are in very, very different states here. Some are quite sophisticated and some aren't. And so how we deploy this is a non-trivial, probably one of the more complicated areas of the whole ADAPT offering. But this guidance is also, it is between develop sense-making maps and designed to deliver value to customers. This is often actually where the real magic is, if we can get it right. So it's important for us to continue to find solutions that actually help SME leaders in this area. Principle 5, embrace succession from day one. Now this one is probably not familiar to a lot of people unless you've necessarily gone through the process of handing a business over. But I learned that there's a term that's thrown around a lot in business called succession planning. And I think it's a misnomer. It's a very unusual term because I don't think you necessarily plan a succession. I think succession is perpetual. Things are being handed over in business all the time. The other thing is that succession planning tended to talk to a person moving on. But we talk about the idea of succession being the succession of the entire system. So what does that mean? That means the vision can't just stop. The vision needs to be handed over from leaders to leaders. Now, leaders of the future have the opportunity to modify or contribute to that vision, purpose, or any other guidance. Then you've got knowledge, organizational knowledge, the intellectual property of the business, the thing that is actually could be the core point of difference, the relationships of the business, roles of the business. So there is a lot to think about when you're handing over and you're thinking about succession. And a succession mindset is vastly different from a leadership tenure mindset. In the world today, we have a lot of people that says a CEO comes in 4 years and they do their tenure, and then another CEO comes in. And what degree of handover was done? And so you get a lot of tenure-based thinking as opposed to handover-based thinking. So thinking about succession or embracing succession from day one works on the idea that everybody can contribute to building the great company of tomorrow by actually contributing and recognizing that they're actually, not only do they have empathy for the people they work with today, but they can also have empathy for future participants and future leaders or future people that are going to execute in that role. Principle 6. Okay, so it is challenge power hierarchy. And I want now to remember that these principles are all interdependent and there is a connection between them all. Well, let's reflect on this principle and think about culture. So if we're going to help leaders build organizations around intrinsic motivation and trust, do you think that a power hierarchy is going to serve that well? And the research says it doesn't, but intuitively you can see why, that if there's a big power distance between the person on the top and the person on the bottom, you can see why that undermines trust, or it at least doesn't optimize the conditions for intrinsic motivation. Now, here's the other thing now, that challenge power hierarchy can inform how we actually design our organizations. So if we think across to those other principles of develop sense-making maps and design to deliver value to customers and in service of all stakeholders, if you think of those, then we can now design our businesses to make sure that we challenge the power hierarchy, because we want to actually get the right culture. So you can see those interdependencies. So that's challenge power hierarchy. The final principle is promote transparency. I think that there's been a lot of evidence out there in the world today about when leaders obfuscate. Now that's just a flash term for hiding things, but I mean, if we looked at the Royal Commission into Banking, or there's many examples of this, hiding things or any form of attempt to hide something generally leads towards some form of corruption. And so we're saying that if we're moving towards high trust, intrinsic motivation, and helping people build businesses like this, and remember, we're doing it because we want to deliver on the owner's aspirations and the leaders of the SME, because we want to build something that can scale and something that can be good for succession. And we need high trust environments. Now, I know I've said that to death during these videos, but that's the fact. So the transparency, and you need to get the right level of transparency once the culture is mature enough. But I think that's why we call it promote transparency, but it is a vital thing in being able to underwrite or support this build healthy culture.